All right, let's jump right in. We're about to explore a really fascinating and honestly pretty challenging theological text called The Problem of Evil and the Judgments of God. Now, this thing tackles one of the oldest questions in faith, but it comes at it from an angle I guarantee you probably haven't seen before. And the author wastes no time at all. Right out of the gate, we get a statement that just completely reframes the entire conversation. The text says, "May we prayerfully grasp the necessity of evil as a background for the display of God's grandest glories." Just that one sentence right there sets the stage for a seriously counterintuitive argument. So the first big idea we've got to get our heads around is this concept of a necessary evil. The way this treatise sees it, evil isn't some cosmic accident or rebellion that got out of hand. No, it argues that evil is a deliberate and in fact essential part of the divine plan. The core logic here is built on a really simple but incredibly powerful idea: contrast. The treatise argues that for us, for humanity, to truly know and appreciate good, we first have to experience its opposite. As the author says, all things are known by contrast. Goodness, from this perspective, just can't be fully understood without the experience of evil. And this idea gets applied to the classic example, Adam in Eden. Think about it. The author suggests Adam was surrounded by absolute perfection, but he couldn't actually appreciate it. And why not? Because he never known the alternative. No misery, no pain, no evil. In this view, a so-called perfect world actually lacks the ability for true gratitude or love. Okay, this brings us to what is, without a doubt, the absolute cornerstone of this entire argument. It's a critical distinction the author makes between evil and sin. And I mean it. Grasping this difference is essential for everything that's coming next. And this, of course, leads to the big question, right? The one that immediately pops into your head. If God creates evil, like the text says he does, doesn't that make him the author of sin? This is the exact tension that the whole treatise sets out to resolve. So to resolve that tension, the author draws this incredibly sharp line between these two words. On one hand, you have evil. From the Hebrew root, it's described as a morally neutral calamity or adversity, something that shatters or breaks things. On the other hand, you have sin, which is defined completely differently, as a mistake, a failure, or wanting of the glory of God. Basically, just falling short of a standard. And to really hammer this point home, the author uses scripture as Exhibit A. It cites the line, "Zimri sinned in doing evil." And the logic is pretty straightforward. If you can sin by doing evil, then the two things can't be the exact same. So from that, the author concludes that evil is not necessarily sin. So let's just lock this in. In this framework, evil is like a force of nature, a calamity. Think of it like a hurricane or an earthquake. It's a shattering, breaking effect, but it isn't inherently immoral in and of itself. And sin gets redefined just as carefully. It's not about being morally depraved. It's simply a failure, a mistake, or lawlessness, literally falling short of a mark. And reframing sin as a mistake is absolutely crucial for where this argument is about to take us. So with these brand new definitions in our back pocket, the treatise starts reinterpreting some of theology's most famous characters. And believe me, it gets pretty provocative. Yeah, this is where a lot of traditional theology gets completely turned on its head. The text argues that Satan was never a fallen angel. Instead, he was created to be a sinner right from the beginning. And if that's true, it means that humanity doesn't have a fallen or sinful nature either. Our problem isn't that we're corrupt, it's just that we have a weak, mortal condition that makes us prone to making these mistakes. And this leads to a truly radical quote from the text. It is only by acknowledging that he created Satan to sin that we can possibly clear him from its stain. Now, that sounds jarring, but the logic is this. If Satan invented sin all on his own, it would mean God's creation spun out of control, which would make God ultimately responsible for that failure. This really clarifies the difference between our nature and our condition. The author claims our actual nature isn't corrupt at all. In fact, it instinctively wants what's right. The problem is our mortal condition, our weakness that makes us stumble and commit those mistakes we call sin. And this redefinition of sin as a mistake brings us to the ultimate paradox of this whole treatise. The idea that the worst acts can actually serve the highest purpose in God's plan. I mean, we've all heard the proverb a million times, 2 wrongs never make a right. It feels like a fundamental rule of the universe, right? It just seems obviously true. Well, the treatise looks at that proverb and argues the exact opposite. The author puts it in this really shocking way. God demands another wrong to make a matter right. And a statement like that is designed to make you stop in your tracks and rethink everything you thought you knew about divine justice. And the perfect case study here is the story of Joseph. You've got his brothers who commit this terrible sin, selling him into slavery. But that wrong act is the very thing that puts Joseph in Egypt, where he eventually saves his entire family and the world from famine. So the brothers' evil act, which went against God's law, ended up fulfilling a deeper, hidden divine intention for a much greater good. And this highlights the final key distinction the author makes, the difference between God's revealed will and his hidden intention. The revealed will is the commandments, you shall not murder. But the hidden intention is the deeper, ultimate purpose, which might actually require that will to be broken. The ultimate example? The crucifixion, a terrible murder that, in this view, fulfilled the ultimate intention for salvation. And this is the climax of the whole argument. In this theological framework, the crucifixion, the greatest sin ever committed against God's revealed will, becomes the ultimate fulfillment of God's hidden intention. The most heinous crime in history becomes the linchpin of the entire divine plan. So, after all of this really complex, mind-bending theology, where does it all lead? Let's take a look at how the treatise actually proposes a resolution to the very problem of evil it set out to explain. Well, the endgame laid out in the treatise is all about universal correction. Evil's job as this sort of cosmic teacher is eventually finished, so it's no longer needed. Divine judgment isn't about eternal punishment, it's about correcting and making all wrongs right. And this leads to a final, universal reconciliation where sin, having served its purpose, just disappears. So the entire treatise really leaves us with this one final, provocative thought that just reframes the whole dilemma. It asks us to seriously consider this. What if the purpose of evil isn't to be defeated, but to be understood,